Hey, Billy, what's a life motto that you live by?
After 28 years in the military, you serve in the military, and I think a motto that I live by is service. Service to others, service to my family, service to my community. That's what you do. You're serving a greater good when you're in the military, or at least you want to be. And then as you proceed through the ranks, you're serving others beneath you. And that's kind of, what we provide here is a service to the community. I think that's probably the most important thing.
Welcome to this edition of the Hoel Truth Podcast. As we continue our series on sales reps, got Mr. Billy sitting here with me. So, Billy, take a minute, introduce yourself, tell us about your family, your beautiful wife, and your kiddos.
Yeah, so my name is Billy Dillon. I'm 49 years old, recent transplant to Indiana. I retired out of the military in 2023 after 28 years of service. My wife, Lindsay, she's a teacher. She's been a teacher for about 13 years now. She's the work-based learning director out of the Whitewater Career Center. We got a 3-year-old that keeps us busy, keeps me young. But yeah, that's me.
Well, you got a few older kids, right?
Yeah, I do. I have a 25-year-old, a 24-year-old, and a 17-year-old daughter, son. My daughter lives in Colorado. She's recently married to Kenny Royal, and my next son, 24, he works in construction, and then I have a 17-year-old that's going to graduate next year.
Yep, I got the honor to meet the 17-year-old. He was up around Christmas. Good young man there. So
quite a bit taller than me. I always wonder,
So, kind of talk that journey. 28 years in the military. Like, seriously, thank you, because as we're in this mess with Iran and all that, it's, to me, I've never been in the military, never really had any family close to me. I know distant relatives, but I also just appreciate the opportunity to live in a free country, to be able to operate a business. So, thank you for your service. What made, a little bit of that story, why you got into the military, maybe some cool things that you got to do while you were there.
Yeah. Excuse me. I joined the Army when I was 18. Wasn't sure if I wanted to do it full time, so I joined the reserves. I come from a family that's got a lot of military in it. My dad was in the Army during Vietnam. My grandfather was in the Army during, both my grandfathers were in the Army during World War II, one in the Navy, one in the Air Force. So it's kind of something I always wanted to do. I was part of the Top Gun generation, so 1985 Top Gun came out. Everybody wanted to be a pilot in the Navy. Do all the cool guy stuff. So in 1995, I joined the reserves. Went through basic and AIT, advanced individual training. Excuse me. And then kind of just worked. And my first wife, we had kids, and I was trying to figure things out. In early 2001, I started looking at the options to go active duty. I worked at an environmental company. Almost died on the job. My boss that was working that day did die on the job. So it was kind of a life-changing thing. I was like, man, if I'm going to die on the job, at least the military gives you a gun and you can fight back. So in early 2001, I started looking at going active duty. I was told no because, going from reserve to active duty was very hard at that time. They had hard numbers. It was a smaller Army at the time. And then September 11th happened, and my phone was ringing off the hook. They were like, hey, you still want to go active duty? I said, yeah, I want to do that. So I was given the opportunity to look at a different job. I was classically trained as a mechanic, but they were like, hey, what do you want to do? I said, what are my options? I said, you can do anything you want, but you're going to have to wait for a school date, and then, you'll have to go through that school, and then you can go wherever. I wanted to go as soon as possible. So they said, okay, if you stay a mechanic, you can go anywhere you want right now. So I was pretty ready to get out of Louisiana at the time. And they said, Europe was an option. I said, great. Spun the globe, put my finger on the spot, and Germany came up. So I had to do a transition period for about 90 days. And then in February of 2002, I was in Germany. And then the rest was history after that. Several deployments to Iraq and Afghanistan. It wasn't illustrious by any stretch of the imagination. A lot of hard work, a lot of time away from, family and friends. It's obviously dangerous anytime you're deployed, no matter what your skill set is, what you're doing. You don't have to be special forces or combat arms to see combat. It's all around you. I really hope we don't put boots on the ground in Iran. It's kind of like the older you get, the more educated you get about some of the things and some of the reasons that we're doing some of the things that we're doing overseas. You kind of get jaded a little bit. And, I don't want to see anybody else die in foreign wars. That's just kind of where I'm at with that. It's just one of those things that I think we should probably focus our energy on the United States. So, but yeah, got to do a bunch of cool stuff. In 2007, I was deployed to Iraq, and at the time I was married. My wife was also a service member, and I was going to re-enlist for 3 more years in the Army, and they were like, what do you want to do for your re-enlistment? Because anytime you re-enlist, it's a big deal. They want you to stay in. So, you can kind of request where you want to re-enlist and all that kind of stuff. And I said I wanted to re-enlist at the base where, the base where my wife was in Iraq. So they flew me in, on a helicopter, and got to land, re-enlist, do my whole thing, and then fly back to the base that I was staying at. So I thought that was pretty cool. They using Army helicopters to fly me somewhere on my request to do a thing that I wanted to do. And then, so I was stationed for 9 years in Germany, for 5.5 years in El Paso at Fort Bliss, and then 4.5 years at Fort Polk in Louisiana. And then I rounded out my career in Alaska, in Fairbanks, Alaska at Fort Wainwright. A lot of people love Alaska. They like, all the scenes of bears catching fish with their face and, oh, that's so cool. Well, what most people don't know is that's Southwest Alaska, and it's about 8 hours away from where I was. So, so very cold, very dark in the winter, 23 hours of sunlight in the summer, but we were ready to wrap that journey up, retired 22 years active duty service, and then decided, I personally won the in-law lottery. Like, my in-laws are great, and we had a young son at the time, 6 months old, when we decided to get out of the Army and retire. So could have moved anywhere, but decided on Connorsville, East Central Indiana. Big family support network, great in-laws, and couldn't be happier.
Yep, awesome. So where'd you meet Lindsay at and all that? So how did
so that was kind of an interesting transition. I was recently divorced, and I was an observer controller trainer, OCT, at Fort Polk. So basically all the units in the Army have to do some sort of national training every so often, and they either train at one of two places, the National Training Center at Fort Irwin, California, or at the joint, I'm going to mess this up, JRTC at Fort Polk. Excuse me. And when those units come to train, they have somebody that, is assigned to them that watches them and evaluates how they train and gives them pointers and observes, trains, and coaches. And Lindsay's unit came through in the International Guard, and the way that Army commands are structured, you have a company commander, a first sergeant, and then you have platoon leaders, which are officers. And Lindsay was the maintenance platoon leader. And just because of the nature of how the National Guard's structured, people are pulled in different directions, and sometimes you have to have subordinate leaders that are more directly in line with the troops that they're leading. So I interacted with her quite a bit, and we became friends, and just ended up staying in touch. And then, like, hey, we're talking all the time, and we kind of have a long distance relationship already. What do you want to take this further? And she said yes, and the rest was history. She moved down to Louisiana in 2019, and we got married that year.
How long were you in Louisiana before you came back to Indiana?
I was in Louisiana for 4.5 years. We left there. She moved up and we got married in 2019. And then I got orders to go to Alaska in 2020. So she lived for about a year and some change in Louisiana, and then we moved. Yep. We got married in May. Awesome. May the 4th. Yeah. It was kind of a wild journey. She had never done the active duty spouse or active duty of any kind, and that was kind of the decision that led us to Alaska. I was like, let's go do some real deal Army stuff. Let's get out of the continental United States. We looked at Hawaii. It wasn't available. Weren't quite ready to make that leap to go back to Europe. That's really far. Mm-hmm. And I'd been there before for 9 years, and I wasn't really ready for that as much as I enjoyed my time in Europe. I didn't want to be that far away from her family. I didn't want to take her away from her family that far. Decided Alaska was available, so we were going to go do that. Didn't know that was going to take us that far away from her family. If you look at it on a map, Alaska, it's big. It's kind of disconnected, but they call it the other island state, for a reason, mm-hmm. because you're geographically disconnected from everything. Flights are expensive into the mainland. It costs you just as much to fly to Hawaii as it would to fly to Indiana. So we did that 3-year stint there, and I went active duty later in my life, so I was quite a bit older than all of the people that I was leading. And one of the things I was talking to Chris about, it's hard to explain to a civilian like how the military works in its totality, because I've spent 22 years and I don't understand every single thing. But Chris and I were talking at breakfast one time, and he was like, "So why'd you retire? You just want to do something else?" And I was like, "Oh, you don't know. No. I was 43 years old. I still had to get up at 5 o'clock in the morning, drive to a physical training formation, stand there, stretch, and then turn right and run 5 miles, the same 5 miles that the 18 and 19 and 20-year-olds were running. I was 43 years old, so I retired because I got old. I retired because I couldn't keep up anymore, my knees and back and everything. I've had knee surgeries and stuff. So that's what I think the civilian population doesn't understand is like, you can be in the Army at 45, but you're doing everything that 18, 19, and 20-year-old's doing, all the push-ups, all the sit-ups, all the running, all the marching, all the everything. And, that's why the military offers a 20-year retirement. It's because we age in dog years for the last 5 years. It's, 43 feels a whole lot like 53.
So Lindsay, she was just in the reserves then, or
she's in the National Guard.
Is she still currently in the National Guard?
No. She got out. The National Guard in reserves can be called up to do a number of things, and that's whether it's training for deployment, stateside deployments. We've seen recently the National Guard go to Washington, D.C. and different states to kind of quell some of the civilian violence and all that kind of stuff. And, she wanted to be a mom. She wanted to pursue her career, and it didn't make sense for our family life, so she went ahead and got out, I think 2020 or 2021. She finally put in her paperwork to get out. Just, with us trying to pursue a family and everything, it didn't make sense for me to retire and then now we're missing her for weeks at a time, or, she gets called out to go to Washington or whatever. Plus it's hard to move when you're in the National Guard because you have to be released from that state and then accepted in the other state because they get funding in Indiana for the head count that they have. When she transferred to Louisiana, it was kind of a headache, getting her down in Louisiana. Indiana wanted her on their books. Louisiana wanted credit on their books because they get paid for that. So it's just kind of that's another kind of in the shadows thing that people don't think about. So it was just kind of it was a headache, so she got out. She downplays her service, but I give her a hard time, being in the National Guard, being a part-timer, but I was a part-timer for 6 years. So it's just one of those things that you kind of don't know about it unless you're dealing with it. But no, she got out. She's a veteran now. But yeah, she enjoyed her time in.
Awesome. So how many more kids, Billy?
0. 0. My 3-year-old, I'll be 64 when he graduates high school. So that's it. One and done.
You're 49 now?
I'm 49.
Whew, yeah, I got a birthday coming up, and I'm going to be 40 pretty soon.
I know, I heard your knees crack.
Yeah. And I chuckled one day. I started doing math. I was like, I think Riley's going to be 16. What is Riley now? Yeah, I mean, Riley, no, by the time I'm 49, Riley will be 16, 17. I was like, poor Billy's got a 3-year-old, holy cow. So, because I always talk about our sales teams. We got so many young guys and young kids. I was like, well, there's Billy. I mean, he fits at least the young kid part about the sales team, No,
I'm old enough to be all the sales guys' dad except for Tanner, but I'd be his much older brother. I mean, having a 3-year-old is, I'm learning a lot as a dad who has a 25, 24, and 17-year-old. I'm still learning a lot because I wasn't there a lot.
Right.
I missed a lot of birthdays, missed a lot of time. One of my deployments was 15 months, and my wife at the time we were in the same unit, and we both deployed to the same place. So her parents, we left our son with her parents when he was about 18 months old. So when we came back, he was 3 years old. Wow. So it was like I missed not first steps, but a lot of that developmental stuff that happens between 1.5 old and 3 years old that I was shocked, with my son now. I was like, oh, I don't remember this and I don't remember that. And my wife, Lindsay, she always reminds me, she's like, well, you didn't get to see it.
Right.
Right. So it's humbling. Mm-hmm. It's humbling to have 3 much older kids and be like, oh, where is all this? Why is he, I do all this, head scratching and it's just because I just wasn't there, so right. I appreciate this time with him a lot more because I missed it before. Right. And that was also one of the things that Lindsay and I agreed to is like, if we have this baby and, things are going to slow down, I'm not going anywhere for a month at a time. I'm not leaving for a year at a time. I probably shouldn't be saying this to you, but I'm working as few weekends as possible. Right. You understand. It's just, I want to be there for as much of it as I can because I missed so much before. And all my other kids, they understood, they grew up in that life. This is the only child that I'll have where he doesn't, military is just like, oh, you did a thing once. Right. Sometimes it feels like I've led several lives because, I was a civilian for the first 6 years of my adult life and then went active duty and now I'm in this portion of my life and it's like, oh man, that was a different time. My first 2 kids got to see a taste of the military life. My 17-year-old, that's what he was raised in. And now my 3-year-old, he's not going to have really anything to do with the military. So it's kind of just, I'm in my eras tour. Right.
Well, and I mean, and it's life and, you'll get to be able to do some things with your older kids because you are so young still in their life compared to when the little one's 25. Like, he might be pushing you out of the nursing home,
helping me up the bleachers at a soccer game.
Yeah, stuff like that. So,
my daughter, my oldest, she texted me on my birthday and said, happy birthday, old man. Like we get to have those kind of jokey things. Right. Whereas my son, I'm already, like when I was buying soccer stuff the other day, because we're putting him in soccer, the guy at Dunham's was like, oh, you getting your grandkids started up and whatever. And I was like, he's my son. He's my son. I didn't adopt him. He's actually my son. And he was like, oh, sorry, but that's just kind of what it is. I choose to grow my beard out. It is gray.
Right.
I clean shaven. I don't know that I'd look much younger, but just kind of got to deal with that as it goes. We'll be going to parent teacher meetings with people in their late 20s. Yep. And then I'll be 50. And I can give everybody life lessons in the room. From the teacher all the way down to the kid. So,
I mean, as long as you don't start looking so old that they think that Lindsay's your daughter and not your wife.
She is aging at exponentially slower than I am.
You covered that one pretty good there, bud.
No. She just turned 40. She doesn't look a day over 28. So there'll be some confusion. Yep. There will be some confusion. I'm 8 years older than her. So happy birthday early. but she'll turn 41 this year.
Awesome. So kind of with some of the other guys, we've kind of talked about like, you know, what your favorite product is to sell. And I know you're newer in this than a Nick, but like what is your favorite product to sell? And then also kind of tie in like, what is about Hoel Roofing? Because you weren't in the roofing sales space before here, but you were kind of in the supplementing part. So right. you've kind of been in the business, but not in this role in this industry.
Right. So I'll sell Hoel a little bit. I tell customers this all the time. I did do supplementing. It was soul sucking. I didn't like it very much, which is why I left. Just talking to adjusters all the time, insurance companies constantly moving the goalpost. And it kind of leads into to answer your question is my favorite thing to sell is what the customer needs. Mm-hmm. Not going in there and trying to give them something that they don't need, not trying to oversell something, but going in there and evaluating what they're asking for and then giving them the best thing that we offer. And I do tell customers that quite often. I want you to have what you want.
Yep.
If you just want a roof that's going to last you 10 years till you sell your property, then let's see what that looks like. If if this is your forever home and this is the house that you want to, have until your final days, let's look at the best thing that we can put on that house that is going to last you for those years. Let's look at metal. Let's look at, the things that are going to give you that longevity. If you're looking at siding, do you just want a different color, or do you want something? Do you want hardy? Is it something that like you want to be proud of? Curb appeal, increase the value of your home. What do you want? And I think that's kind of my favorite thing about this job is getting people the thing that they need, the thing that they want. If it's something I've always wanted a standing seam metal roof. I don't want anything fancy color wise. I just want a black standing seam because I think it's beautiful and it'll look good on my home. Then yes, I will give you every option that you have. And we can talk about, other things too. Do you need gutters? Do you need all this other kind of stuff? If you've got a 900 square foot house and you want standing seam, let's talk about it.
Right.
If you just want an Oak Ridge, shingle, then we'll talk about that too. So I don't really have a favorite product, but I enjoy interacting with our customers in a way that they can have what they've wanted, whether it's an emergency or it's just something that they want to do. That's kind of where I'm at.
Yep. Talk a little bit about Chris. I mean, Chris Britt is active sales manager, and yes, you literally are old enough.
I am old enough to be his dad.
To be his dad,
by quite a few years. Yeah.
And as an older person, like kind of talk what Chris brings as a leader, because like that's respectful to you at your age that you can come in and be under a leader at that age, because I kind of thought that early on in the business. Now I'm getting more gray, so I look older than I am, and that kind of stuff. But even early on, like sometimes I'd go meet with customers and they'd be like, with the name of Bob, like it automatically makes you like 55, and then they're like, oh, wait a second, you're the owner? I'm like, yeah. But kind of talk a little bit about Chris.
Yeah, so Chris, there were several reasons that I was excited to come work here. One, it was a 3-stage interview process. Interviewed, came and talked to you, went and ate dinner with Chris and his wife, with Lindsay, and then followed it up, had a long talk with Emily and, all that kind of stuff. That's fairly, the 3-stage interview is not rare today, but it's rare when you're doing it with a family-owned business. Mm-hmm. Like sometimes the owner, they're in and they're out. You don't really see them. You guys are really involved in this. Used words like systems, refining systems, and those are military terms. And whether you knew it or not, they are. That's what you're doing in the military constantly, is refining systems, seeing what works, seeing what doesn't work. And and one of the things that made me successful in the military is quite often I was never the smartest person in the room, but I knew how to surround myself with the smartest people. And I feel like we do that very well here. I don't think any one person holds every single ounce of knowledge we have. We have Nick, we have Cody, we have, you, Emily, Ellie's, you know, one of the foundations of the company. But Chris in particular has he has an ability to slow things down and explain them at a level where you're just starting out, or you've been doing this for 5 years. If you don't understand something, he can break it down in a way that you're like, okay, that makes sense. And I've told Chris this several times. I'm humble enough to know that I know what I don't know. You know, he knows immensely more than I do, you know, and I can be deferential. You know, I've had to do that in the military. You know, rank has its privileges, they say, but at the same time, you get up far enough to where you're removed from the boots on the ground, and they're always going to do it way more efficiently because their time is more important to them than anything else.
Yep.
So that's where I leverage Chris the most, is like, hey, help me get this to where I'm refining my processes to where I'm better at this in a shorter amount of time, so that I can be mindful of the customer's time. I can be mindful of my time and be mindful of the company's time. You know, I want to get to where I'm not driving out to a house 3 times and wasting the company gas and doing all this kind of stuff. And, you know, Chris is built for that. You know, he's an explainer. He understands things. He puts it on a level to where even a new guy like me can understand it. I know all the parts of a roof, but I don't come from the construction background. But now, you know, I can get up there and I'm like, basically, what would Chris tell me to do? You know, how would Chris explain this so that I can understand it for myself, so I'm not tying up his time? You know, so it all comes from a place of like making yourself better, makes the company better, you know, and delivers a better product for the customer in the end.
Yep. What, so, I mean, you're kind of, I mean, you said like, you know, you're really focused on family time, and, you know, that's awesome. Like you know, as a business owner, like there's that balance of like pushing your guys, being the most efficient, you know, but also realizing like, hey, you know what, you've got a family, you want to be, you know, there's nothing wrong with that, you know, and it was kind of ironic because like the successful ones that we've had consistently were like them late 20-year-old guys that, you know, what I have learned was, you know, I need somebody that's married and it's got kids, because like I've had them where they weren't married or had kids and lived in their girlfriend's parents' basements and didn't work very hard, you know? Right. So there's that balance, you know, but then, you know what, there's also a level of you gain trust when you walk up to a customer quicker than when Nick was doing this 5 years ago, because I literally had one customer call me one time and was like, hey, just so you know, we had 6 people out here and Nick was the most educational of anybody we had. Right. And I remember when he pulled up and got out of his truck, I looked at my wife and said, is he even old enough to have a driver's license? So like, you know, so it is fun for me just to be able to expand. Like I said, like I look at people like you can learn from. Like I have 0 military experience. Like I don't understand the military at all. That's why sometimes I ask you random questions about it, just because like I had an ex-brother-in-law that was in it, but we didn't really talk that much about it, you know? So like, no, it's funny you say that, like that you're like them are military terms. I'm just trying to make the business as efficient as possible for a guy like you, because like one thing that I've learned when people come in, like it's the frustration of not knowing what to do or how it needs to be done. Right. Is quality people want to be held accountable, and quality people want to do it the right way. You know, right. That's what I've learned, you know. And you know, you said Ellie's such a huge part of this business. I mean, she is like, I mean, and just, you know, you talk about somebody that's grown a lot with a company and watched us grow, you know, as a company. And I mean, she tries to learn so much, and it's so cool to see how much knowledge she has in the construction world now compared to when she started. Sure. You know, she was just an eager person willing to work, which is, you need that, you know, but she's continued, you know, to grow. And, you know, I think she'll be with us here 4 years here in a couple months. And that's cool for me, you know, because that's my goal. I want a company that has a lot of veterans here that know what they're doing and like care, because, you know, there's the culture that me and Emily were intentional about. It's to the point now we're getting big enough that you've got to be intentional about it. Adam's got to be intentional about it. Like Bob and Emily can't control it. You know, yeah, she's really involved in the day to day with, you know, the production stuff. Emily is. Me, you never know. Like I'm really just trying to keep Adam and Chris and TOC all rolling down the track, and you know, and whatnot, and also pitching in to try to help. So, what are some goals over the next few years that, you know, that maybe you have, kind of, you know, just over the next few years?
Yeah, well, you're talking about, you know, the confidence part of it, and age, and all that kind of stuff, and you know, that was kind of one of my struggles when I first started. Was, you know, competence breeds confidence. So the more you know about a thing, the more, you know, offhanded you could talk about things. You know, it doesn't become so structured where I can't get outside of this box because I don't know what I'm talking about. I don't want to say the wrong thing. You want to be, you know, deliberate in the things that you say. And, you know, just yesterday, actually, I had a lady, you know, she was like, well, thank you for, you know, coming out here and actually telling me the why behind things. You know, she said, I had a guy that wouldn't come give me an estimate unless my husband was here. And I was like, okay, well, I appreciate that, you know, but if you have any other questions, you know, just give me a call. I can answer all that kind of stuff. And I didn't have that background before. Once again, that's where Chris comes in. You know, he taught me, I bounced things off of you, Ellie, Emily, Nick, Cody, Chris Combs, all those guys, and to give me the confidence in that I'm telling the right thing. I don't ever want to say the wrong thing. So that's kind of where my goals are built upon, is being able to go out there with confidence and say these things. Obviously, this is a business, not a charity. So, you know, financial security for my family is important to me. One of the things that a lot of people don't know about the military is when you retire or you get out, just in general, they do a pay audit on you. So you don't get paid for 45 days. I went from making six figures to one day I just didn't have anything deposited into my account. And that was the first time in 22 years that I sort of was financially insecure for a minute. They briefly go over it in briefings and stuff like that, but you're like, yeah, whatever. You know, just give me my papers so I can get out of here and grow a beard and, you know, be a hippie again, you know, and then you don't get paid. It's like, oh no, you're used to getting paid on the 1st and the 15th. So, you know, my goals, be the best representative of my brand, which, you know, I have a last name that's important to me as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
Be a brand ambassador for Hoel, you know, be the best branded ambassador for Hoel that I can be, excuse me. And then, you know, continue to learn how to be the best father and husband, you know, that I can be. I've done pretty much everything in my life that I've wanted to do. This is just another chapter. This is a small area, you know, small town area. Your name it means a lot. You know, I was telling Lindsay when I first started this, I was like, man, I don't want to be bad at this because I'm going into homes every day and I don't know anyone. A lot of times I'm going to be at Kroger. The people that I see are going to be people whose homes I was in. I don't want them, you know, whispering over to their significant other or their friend and be like, oh, that's a guy who didn't really know a whole lot, blah, blah, blah. You know, I want to be like, I want to go in there and they're like, hey, Billy, how's it going? Thanks for, you know, getting this figured out. And because that's how I'm going to establish my roots here. You know, I'm 49. I'm not, you know, hanging out at the bars and all that kind of stuff. And I didn't graduate from here, so I don't have any lifelong friends here. I'm kind of establishing all of that here, you know. So I've become friends with the guys that I work with here. I was just sitting before coming up here with Tanner in Connersville. I saw him over at the McDonald's off 30th Street. I was like, I got time to kill him, go see what he's doing. You know, so my goals are mainly personal, you know, continuing doing things that enrich my life,
oh, absolutely.
You know, that enrich the lives of the people around me. We recently lost my father-in-law, so, you know, we've all kind of rallied around my mother-in-law. Like I said, I won the in-law lottery, so, you know, all those things are profoundly important to me, you know, so that's kind of that.
I mean, the older we get, I mean, my dad's semi-retired and he's in here 3 times a day, it seems like, you know, and sometimes I want to complain about it, you know, but I'm like, you know what, he's not getting any younger, and the days are limited with him, you know, and, you know, and he's chilled way out since I was a kid, you know, but the one day he came in here, Emily's like, I'm sorry, I'm busy today. And he's like, I came in here to see Ellie. So, and now him and Adam's always talking, you know, to me, like I, you know, you said like some of your goals, like husband, father, like that's the most important goal out there. That's something that I'm working on. Like I'm dealing with, you know, some of my crap so I can be a better husband and father, because I've heard Ellie say, man, you're an easier boss to get along with now. And I'm like, well, that's good. I mean, hopefully it's, you know, it's from the work being in, you know, at home. And that's what I want. Like I said, I want everybody to be successful, but I also know success looks different for certain people, you know, and it doesn't, just because your goals look different than this goal, there's really nothing wrong with that, you know, at the end of the day. So for me, as long as guys represent us well with character, like that's the most important part, you know.
And that's what's important to me as well, you know. It's weird because I wear your name on my chest and my back, you know, so I'm aware of that.
Yep.
You know, that comes up in conversation probably more often than you realize. You know, like people don't necessarily know. They're like Hoel Roofing. I've heard it called Noel Roofing.
Right.
You know, like all this kind of stuff. I'm like, oh no, it's Bob and Emily Hoel. You know, it's a family-owned business. And oddly enough, that's important to me because I always wanted to be a business owner. I'm just risk adverse. Mm-hmm. So I was never willing to cash in all my chips and just, well, we may or may not have a house tomorrow.
Right.
You know, security is more important to me. So working for a family-owned company, you know, I'm kind of vicariously getting that through you guys, because that kind of stuff is important to me. You know, it's like we're not guaranteed anything.
Right.
We're not guaranteed anything. You know, this could all be gone tomorrow. For you, for us, you know, like you see businesses get shuttered and it's like, wow, well now I'm a piece of that.
Right.
I'm a plank holder. I own a small portion of this because what I do is important to the overall success of the company. And I don't take that lightly. So, you know, yeah, it's being successful. What is that? I don't know. You know, is it selling a certain amount of something? Maybe.
Right.
But maybe not.
Right.
Maybe not. Maybe it's the jobs I don't get because I coach the customer how to get it done a different way. Mm-hmm. You know, quite often, you know, we're in elderly people's homes on a fixed income. It's just one of them under the roof. And, you know, maybe I tell them like, hey, I would do this.
Right.
You know, and I think that's being successful as well because you help somebody out.
Absolutely.
You know, I like you said, what is success? I don't know. Being a good person, being a good father, being a good husband as best you can be. And if you happen to be financially successful based off of that, and so be it.
Yep.
Yeah.
Billy, I just want to thank you for your time. Thank you for everything that you do for our family, our business, you know, the whole thing. And, you know, it's just, it's fun for me for just being able to be around you and your family, you know, like, you know, unfortunately you did this, you know, lose your father-in-law, but when we were at the viewing that meant a lot to your mother-in-law. Like, it was funny. She's like, oh, Hoel Roofing. Yeah. And then Lindsay's like, oh, that's Mr. Hoel. And I'm like, okay, I don't need to hear that.
That's my dad.
But, you know, your mother-in-law then was like, oh, wow. Like, you know, and that's the business that me and Emily want, like caring for our people, you know, you know, I'm going to throw Chris and Emily under the bus. Chris was nervous. He's like, I can't go first in this line. I was like, I'll go first, guys, you know? So, but it's just, you know, that's Dave Ramsey says, don't miss a birth, don't miss a funeral, you know, and there's a lot of truth to that of like going to support your people. And because, you know, yeah, like, you know, and you're in Connersville. So I grew up in Glenwood. So, you know, you're in that spot outside of being in Rushville. Like more people are going to know Hoel Roofing than somebody that's up in Greenfield, you know? So like you're, you know, it's just, you know, it's part of it. Emily's family's in Centerville. She's got some in Connersville. So, you know, that kind of all just, you know, blends in there. But seriously, thank you for everything you do for us. We appreciate you, sir.
Thank you.